welcome to our YouTube channel here. John, how are you?
I'm doing well, Amanda. Doing well. Just like I said, drying out a little bit. A lot of rain here on the East Coast, but with rain and warm weather brings the mosquitoes, and that's why we're
Yes,
here to
it
talk today.
does. And that is what we are here to talk about today, which is Zone Out, Nices's latest mosquito product. John here is going to talk about how Zone Out will fit into an integrated mosquito management program, best practices for targeting mosquito harborage and breeding areas, how to maximize controls while minimizing environmental impacts, and why PMPs are making this switch. So, John is our Mid Atlantic Regional Manager for NICES, and his career has focused on commercial pest control with experience in service, distribution, and manufacturing. So, we're going to ask any questions that you have throughout this live Q&A in the chat box, and we're just going to go ahead and get started here, John.
Oh, outstanding. Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. Today, as Amanda laid out, we're going to discuss sustainable mosquito management and how Zone Out can become a part of your effective integrated mosquito management or your IMM program. We're going to review the different segments of IMM, and when you combine these together, this can transform your what would have been a blow and go or a spray and pray mosquito service into one that is both sustainable and effective. So let's begin by looking at EPA exempt 25B products and how they compare against the synthetic insecticides that we use out there for mosquito applications. Um, EPA minimum risk pesticides are materials are pesticides and insecticides that have been constructed of materials that are of little or no risk to human health or the environment. While these are EPA exempt, all right, most states still require that these products be registered or notify the state before they can be sold into that state. The biggest difference between synthetic insecticides and 25B botanicals is 25Bs are not intended to last a significant amount of time in the environment. They off gas through evaporation. They are comprised of the essential oils and food grade acids, also other oils and ingredients that are all on the EPA pre approved ingredient list. And over time, these oils do evaporate. And actually, this is one of the things that gives uh, Zone Out its spatial repellency during this off gassing process. Zone Out is a botanical, and here language matters. Zone Out is a botanical. We refer to it as a botanical. It's not organic because not all of the elements that comprise Zone Out are made of organic materials, and it's not an all natural either. Some of the products that are in Zone Out or in your other 25Bs could be artificially synthesized. Say, in the case of rosemary oil, if there's no fresh pressed available, the manufacturer might have used, say, a synthetic in its place. They all qualify as 25B. They're all FIFRA exempt. They all do not require an EPA registration number. However, they are, you cannot call them organic or all natural. I just don't want you to get tripped up in the language there. So, what is Zone Out? Zone Out is a proprietary blend of 8 essential oils, a total of 9 active ingredients. This is not a common. This is not a common generic or excuse me. A common blend that you're going to see in a lot of the other products that are out there. This is not what I refer to as a Me Too product. Many products share the similar footprint, and by consequence, they share many of the same drawbacks. Zone Out is deliberately engineered around the best documented repellent synergies in scientific literature. This stacked multi-oil approach is rare among 25B products, but this is what the science behind Zone Out is leveraging, and this is going to explain in part or great detail the 10-second knockdown that Zone Out has, and also the strong repellency. Let's look at the Zone Out components individually first and discuss them, and then we're going to discuss the secret sauce and really what makes the science that drives the Zone Out's performance. Clove oil and eugenol, you're going to find eugenol in a lot of 25B products that are out there. It disrupts neurotransmitters and it acts as a repellent, as an irritant. Thyme oil or thymol, You might see that in some of these products out there. Membrane disruption and inhibition of the enzymes. Cinnamon oil is an ad here for us. Strong toxicity and metabolic interference. Cedarwood oil, repellency and toxicity. Corn mint oil, rapid knockdown and volatility. Sesame oil, it is a synergist. It's going to also enhance cuticle penetration. And this is also another oil that inhibits detoxification of the insect. And then finally, we have cottonseed oil and sodium lauryl sulfate. These are carriers and surfactant that improve the spreading and the penetration. Now, when you stack them intentionally, as we have at NISIS, the results are amplified, and we achieve what we call stacked synergy. All right. So, what are some of these documented synergistic pairs? The zone out's intentionally formulated around these best documented repellent synergies in the scientific literature. It is all peer-reviewed studies. It is peer-reviewed studies and also U.S. patents that we base this on. Corn mint oil and sodium lauryl sulfate individually by themselves, they have their own performance. However, this patent really proves and establishes the fact that when we combine the two together, you get lightning fast knockdown and really supercharge both of these, and they're synergistic with one another, allowing for a lightning fast knockdown and a very quick kill. Sesame oil by itself has its own properties, but when we combine this with clove oil, we get enhanced toxicity. Again, the thyme oil and the clove oil, when we're mixing those together, we're getting a repellency equivalent to 25% DEET. Also, I go back to eugenol. You're going to see that in some of the other products that are out there. However, it doesn't perform quite as well as when you pair it with whole clove oil, and therefore we are amplifying the efficacy of both of these. The references, I'll make sure that we drop down here in the comments section here at the end. But the scientific studies and the scientific data just proves that when these pairs work together, you're going to get enhanced cuticle penetration. You're going to get multi target neurotoxicity. Say that fast 3 times, John. And you're going to get inhibition of the insect to be able to detoxify itself. So we're getting a lot of amplification by the way that we stack this. Some of the additional formulation aids that we're talking about is sodium lauryl sulfate and the carrier oils like sesame and cottonseed oil. These are going to amplify that activity that I was talking about. This is going to improve the spread and the uptake. Your sesame oil, that's a synergist and a carrier. Okay, but let's marry the clove and the cinnamon together, and you're going to get two of the strongest individual 25B repellents that are out there on the market. We keep going. Eugenol, I referred that earlier. Eugenol is very common in a lot of the 25Bs that are out there, but very rarely is it paired with whole clove oil. This is where you're going to pick up the synergy, and this is going to outperform just eugenol by itself, and also going to offer a lot of product stability. Your thyme oil is doing double duty here. Cuticle penetration, and oh, by the way, when we add this to corn mint oil, it's really going to speed up the neurotoxic punch. And then we have all their multiple oil blends. I could go on and on about this, but I believe that you're getting the picture of the science that is leveraged into the creation of Zone Out. These multi-oil blends create an overall additive and synergistic repellency that just your single oil or your basic blends cannot touch. Bottom line is Zone Out's precise ratios create a stack synergy and an effect that these single oil or these basic compounds uh, can't duplicate, and that's what we believe makes Zone Out stand alone with this stack synergy science that it's all leveraged on. A little bit more about it. Look, here's some more of the multiple modes of action that we kind of reviewed and summarized. You're getting multiple neurological pathways leading to paralysis and death. I mean, that's because it's going to limit their ability to move, feed, and reproduce. Some of your oils are going to um, coat the insect's outer body rather than penetrate the exoskeleton. So now you're going to get suffocation by blocking the breathing passages. We could achieve dehydration by pulling the moisture from the inside of the insect's body. The main mode of repellency here, though, and this is a key factor of zone outs or essential oils ability. Their ability to mask critical insect pheromones, and we're going to come around to pheromones and charomones here in just a bit and explain the difference between the two. But zone out's ability to mask these critical pheromones, this is going to this is going to confuse the insect and really interfere, impact their ability to find their harborage area, and also to attract more insects to that area. And that's key. I want you to hold on to that and remember that, because we're going to circle back around to that at the end. And again, some of these individual products that are individual elements that are doing this, the cottonseed oil suffocation, your sodium lauryl sulfate, that's your carrier and your adjuvant. Oh, by the way, that's also going to act for dehydration. And then your ethyl lactate is just another mode of action we have to penetrate that cuticle. So you can see we have a lot of science working very aggressively on that arthropod, on that mosquito, to achieve that quick contact kill, but also to maintain that repellency after the application. Look, some of the other reasons that the technicians, the early reports are that technicians are loving working with Zonat out there in the field is its low viscosity, and this is by design. Zonat has fewer emulsifiers than some of the others in its class, and this is going to allow for much easier mix into the solution. And because it's less viscous, this is going to result in a lower phytotoxicity, and this is going to decrease the possibility of burn or damage to lawns and landscapes, as long as we're using the product as long as we're mixing and using the product as directed. And the last part about this I'll say is that one main reasons they love working with this is that it's cinnamon mint fragrance. It's not only in a concentrate, but it's a nice light mild fragrance in the work solution. It's not going to run you out of the truck. Again, technicians love working with this because of the odor. One thing, Zone Out is not labeled to be applied to edibles. Okay, so we want to give easement, or we want to give a little bit of setback away from edibles and make sure that we're not applying that to them. One place where we don't have to provide aquatic setback, however, when we're using Zone Out, is with water features. There is no aquatic setback like you would find with some of your other synthetic mosquito materials that are out there on the market. Zone Out's labeled. You can apply it around boat docks, to boat houses, waterway vehicles, lake houses, and also boats. Okay, so very useful. With this in combination with our other Nature's Element product, Web Out, that we have in our arsenal, is a great 1-2 punch for doing work around aquatic features. But with all products, remember, never bring concentrate down near a body of water. Okay, I don't care if it's 25B or a synthetic. Let's do all our mixing and loading up on level surfaces, well far away from any water features. So I've talked about Zone Out in general, the science behind it, what's leveraging it, what gives it its get up and go and its staying power. But really, I'm doing the whole process of the service without really talking about going back to the beginning. And we really do need to go back to the beginning, because we need to discuss and discover the mosquito's biology and their life cycle. In this section, we're going to talk about their habits and why the mosquito needs your blood. We're going to discuss source reduction, a key element of integrated mosquito management. What is source reduction? What are larval environments? How are we hunting them, and how are we resolving them? And also, part of the biology lesson, we're going to be identifying the enemy, because you need to be able to do a proper insect ID, proper mosquito ID, to understand the species, their breeding areas, their flight patterns, things of that nature. We're going to touch on larviciding. Larviciding, another key component of integrated mosquito management. When we cannot manage those larval environments, we need to be able to treat them somehow. And we're going to talk about larviciding, where and when. And that's going to bring us full circle back around to barrier applications, kind of where we started at today with Zone Out. All right. And that's the fourth leg of this table. Biology, identifying the enemy, that's one leg of this table. Source reduction, that's another leg. Larviciding, that's another leg. And barrier application. You need all four components of that to be truly effective integrated mosquito management program. The last part about this, we want to talk about and it wouldn't be a nicest talk without us touching on safety. Okay, best management practices. We're going to discuss drift management, your technician's personal safety, and then also pollinator protection when we're out there in the field. So, what are some of the key components of an integrated mosquito management program? Really, there's two parts of a IMM. There's administrative actions, and then there's also physical actions that we have out there in the field. And what do I mean by administrative actions? That's regular surveillance. Regular surveillance, whether it's adult surveillance, sometimes there's larval surveillance. This is achieved through CDC light traps, through larval dipping, uh, identification under microscopes. Also, another admin part of this is monitoring the weather and the weather patterns. I guarantee if you're charting your weather patterns and the weather behavior of your area, your zip codes that you're servicing, you're going to see a direct correlation between the weather events that you're charting and also to what your how your phone's ringing, whether it be with reservices or with initial applications. And the last part of this administratively or more just an instructional value is your public education component of this. Public education is key within integrated mosquito management. Show them what you did, but then also to show them what they need to do to help you to achieve controls. Now we're getting into the kind of the service part of it, or the physical part of it. Habitat manipulation. We're talking about source reduction. Also targeted larviciding and targeted use of adulticides. One thing I will say about surveillance: you don't need a fancy light trap to do surveillance. You can do anecdotal landing counts, and that is really just what it sounds like. You're going to go stand out in a yard, a certain part of the yard, a certain part of the day, and you literally are going to do counts of how many mosquitoes land on you within an X amount of period of time. If you are going to do one of these landing count surveys, just understand, try to do them at the same time of day, try to do them in the same place of the yard or same area of the yard. Try to be aware of the type of clothing that you're wearing and the color of clothing. It does make a difference. And let's try not to use perfumes or cologne or anything like that that's going to mask or confuse the mosquito when we're out there. But these are the key components of an IMM program, and it really does take all parts of this to be successful. So, what are mosquitoes? Mosquitoes are pollinators. That's right. They are beneficial in some degree of the explanation. Okay. They are pollinators through their nectar feeding, and which we're going to talk about here. And then they also serve as a food source. In the winged version, you're talking about for birds and bats. And in the larval form, we're talking about fish food. All right. But the juice is not worth the squeeze. They are also vectors, competent vectors of disease. So any benefit they might give us as a beneficial insect is far outweighed by the fact that they are competent vectors of malaria, dengue, Zika, West Nile virus, yellow fever, just to name a few. They are the deadliest creature on the earth. They are responsible for 750,000 to 1 million deaths annually globally. Say that's 750,000 to 1 million souls globally on an annual basis. All right. And what happens is these pathogens are transmitted through these blood meals, um, and and uh, and they use blood meals from mammals to create viable eggs for their reproduction. And this is a critical part of the cycle of life with them. They locate their host by CO2, body heat, and a bunch of other chemical markers. One of them is called pheromones, which we're going to discuss next. We as mammals are the hosts. We give off CO2s. We gives off CO2, excuse me, and pheromones. What are the difference? You heard me say pheromones earlier, and these are pheromones. Pheromones are a two-way street. Pheromones are mutually beneficial. Pheromones are something that an insect or even a human being actually puts off or gives off, and that gives chemical signals to others of the same species. Pheromones, on the other hand, are a one-way street. We still give off these markers of the signals, but parasites, ectoparasites such as mosquitoes and bed bugs, they cue in on these cues. Whether it is carbon dioxide or olfactory sensors that we're giving off, it could be body heat, it could be odors, ammonia, carboxylic acid, um, um, and various other things. So these are the markers that we're giving off in the sense that we're giving off. So how does this happen in our environment? So we're all together and we're all having a nice picnic meal. We got four generations of family out there. Everybody's happy and enjoying themselves. And then here it comes, the Godzilla mosquito comes in, and it's going to come in and it's going to take a blood meal. All right. But the thing is it's not going to fly straight from its resting area to grandpa. Okay, it's going to fly here, and then it's going to rest, and it's going to loaf for a little while, and then it's going to maybe hopscotch over to here, and then it's going to loaf for a little while. Then it's going to go to this area and loaf for a little while, and then maybe up underneath this underhang and loaf for a little while, and then finally it's going to go over and it's going to bite grandpa right on the hind parts. All right. So using this information and using this knowledge that we just gained here, we're going to understand this is why we perform the applications to our resting areas with our adulticide, to create a barrier or to create kill zones for the adults. Just keep that in mind. They're not flying from straight from point A to point B. And this is why we want to make sure we're doing these applications, these barrier applications to the underside of all this foliage and all these resting areas where they're going to be hopscotching along the way to take their blood meal from the host. So let's talk a little bit about the mosquito life cycle. All right, first things first, we have a gravid female. Gravid is a $10 word, meaning the female has eggs. Okay, and she's carrying a certain payload of eggs, for lack of better description, and she's going to seek out a good environment she knows is going to sustain the development of her eggs to adult. The water type and the environment of the egg laying is really species dependent. And with some of these species, she's going to lay her eggs singularly in clusters. That's the container breeding mosquito. Or she's going to lay them in rafts. That's the Culex mosquito or the canopy mosquito. And we'll break these down. So what's going to happen is after about a period of 1 to 3 days, the warmer the weather, the warmer the environment, the faster all of this process happens. These eggs are going to hatch off and they're going to go into the larval stage. And here in this stage, they're going to spend 4 instars or 4 developmental stages. And they're going to consume through filter feeding biomaterials through the water that they're breeding in. And then they're going to molt, and they're going to shed, and they're going to go to the next stage and the next stage. And they're going to go through 4 instars, and then they're going to and then they're going to move to the pupal phase. The pupal phase after the fourth instar, and then they're going to emerge immediately into an adult and then go through a process which we're going to discuss next. But as you can see, this is a math problem. I will give you an idea that these various stages, and they're all kind of timed out with number of days. But let's just talk about this in context of weather, in the context of Aedes mosquitoes. All right. With your Aedes mosquitoes, this whole process can happen as little as 7 days with high temperatures. I'm talking about 85 to 95 degrees. At the beginning of the season, which we're kind of struggling through right now in some parts of the United States, your cooler temperatures 55 to 70 degrees, this whole process might get extended out to 20 days or longer. So I want you to think about this whole breeding cycle in context of our service intervals in heavy mosquito habitats and also heavy mosquito season. If you're in a heavy habitat and we have these accelerated temperatures and you got plenty of moisture around, you can see that this is going to be a math problem. That's why spraying and praying or blowing and going just doesn't work. We have to locate these larval pools, we have to locate these developmental areas, and we have to deal with them individually. So what happens during this process? And I want to just make this point right here. Everything that I just explained up until the emergence, they are not a public health threat. The eggs are not a public health threat. The larva is not a public health threat. The pupa is not a public health threat. Heck, even the male, which doesn't bite and only mates, that's not a public health threat. The only form that mosquitoes are a public health threat is the biting female. So it makes sense that when they're confined to these aquatic systems, okay, it's literally is like shooting fish in a barrel. This is one of the most effective and green methods for mosquito control is targeting the mosquito in its aquatic larval stage. I can't stress that enough. All right. So what's going to happen here is that it's going to come out of the pupal stage. And as you see in this illustration over here, the mosquito will rest on the water tension of the water. Okay. And this is over the next 24 hours, a hardening of the exoskeleton, a hardening of the wings due to the exposure to the air and a chemical reaction called sclerotization. And the mosquito is very weak and very frail at this point, and it's going to be hiding in vegetation that is very close, if not immediately located, next to the breeding area. Okay. The males are going to emerge first, and then they're going to linger around these breeding sites and they're going to wait for the females to emerge. One of the first meals they take is not a blood meal, as a matter of fact, it is a nectar meal. The newly emerged adults, they're male and the female, they're not going to take that blood meal immediately. They're in a very fragile state, okay, and they need some energy. So their primary energy source is going to be sugar from plant nectar, flower nectars, or plant juices, which are located very close to what? The emergence of the breeding area. They need this energy for quick dispersal flights, for their mating flights, and also too for their longevity and their activity. Again, the biting female is the only one that's going to take a blood meal. That's going to happen later. That's going to help. That's going to happen to form the hemoglobin in their eggs. The reason I go through this long kind of explanation about their breeding area, because between the larval manipulation, the manipulation of the larval habitats, and then doing a barrier application around the foliage of these emergence areas, we can intercept these mosquitoes before they really get a chance to become a public health threat. Again, integrated mosquito management. But they will take a blood meal. And here are some different examples of mosquitoes, of different species of mosquitoes actively feeding on the blood. The female has a sheath over her proboscis, or her feeding tube, and this gets pushed back, and then she's going to insert her proboscis, or a complex system of six needle-like mouth parts, six needle-like mouth parts that are going to go in and insert and actually work like a sawzall, like a reciprocating saw, to actually cut the skin and extract the blood. All right, she's going to consume about 2 times her own body weight. During this process, this is when an anticoagulant, or something that she uses to grease the tracks, okay, this keeps the blood from clotting. She's going to inject this in her saliva to prevent this clotting. This is actually what makes the mosquito bites swell up and bump and itch, okay. It's during this exchange of fluids that the mosquitoes become the vector of pathogens, okay. It's not that she's biting someone else and then landing on me and injecting that person's blood or that host's blood into me. It's actually the pathogen is being exchanged during that anticoagulant, that little bit of saliva exchange during her feeding process. Again, 2 times her body weight, and then boom, flies off. And why does she need these eggs? Why does she need the blood? To make her eggs viable. Really imagine an egg without a yolk. I mean, it's pretty much that simple. She needs the hemoglobin in the host body, the host blood, to form the eggs to make them viable. In a rotating pattern, this here is actually an illustration of of an egg raft here, but this here is real pictures from the field. The upper right hand here, this is a Culex pipiens, or a house mosquito. This is public enemy number 2, I like to say. She lays her eggs in rafts, 150 to 300 in a raft, and again, these are all fire off. These are all hatch off about the same time. Down here in the lower right, these are individual 80s or container breeding mosquito, public enemy number 1. These football shaped eggs are laid in clusters or singularly, and they're laid on the main water area, or the area that kind of floods out. And I'll show you the next illustration coming up is a flower pot, but it's that little scum ring from where we get a little bit of rain and the water evaporates. That's where she's going to lay her eggs, waiting on that water to flood out and inundate her eggs. So, what are mosquito larval habitats? Really, folks, they are any place where water can collect. Okay, this here on the lower left hand side, lower right hand side, left hand side. I was in the army. I do know my right from my left. But I'm looking at the screen, I'm a little backwards here. But in the clay flower pot, this is a very good example of a man-made larval breeding area. This is where she's laying her eggs along this edge of water line. She's waiting for the water to flood or to inundate her eggs. An example of a natural larval habitat, would be this tree blowdown. You get a little crater here underneath where the roots used to be. You get a little bit of rainwater, fill that up. Boom, that's a natural larval habitat for our container breeders. Either way, it doesn't matter if it's man-made or if it's natural. These are Those are the environments. So what do we have here? These are actual visuals, film that I have of the larval activities. We see the water here is relatively clear. This is out of a bobcat bucket that was parked in front of my house for about a month before I was having some work done. Okay, and it accumulated some rain. And this one here, it is not an old wives' tale that they can breed in a bottle cap of water, because as we zoom out, that is actually an oak leaf in a little depression that is on top of the cover that was over top of the wood splitter at my place. So those are just two examples of what larval habitats look like out there in the real world in the field. So larvae, how do they survive in this environment? Well, they have a siphon or a snorkel, for lack of better description, a breathing tube at the rear, and they attach themselves to the water tension, the surface tension of the water to breathe through this snorkel. It's a little interface that they use to breathe through, and then they're going to hang from an angle, and then they're going to feed through their filter feeders that are going to feed on organic material that is in the water. And depending on the species of larva, the water is going to be clean and clear, or it's going to be mucky and stagnant, and we'll get into those. The only one that's the exception to this rule is the Anopheles larva. They do not have a snorkel. However, they do lay parallel to the surface of the water without that prominent siphon. So getting back to source reduction, we're going to use the tip and the toss method. And here it is. If you cannot get the homeowner or the client to flush out this collector or this water vessel, this area, this larval habitat with clean fresh water every 5 to 7 days. Why are we at 5 to 7 days? Because we just learned a few slides ago that whole egg to adult thing can happen as little as 8 days in the heat of the summer. So every 5 to 7 days, we need to be able to flush these out or tip them over. But that's not always going to be, that's not always going to be possible. And really, the best possible remedy for this is to get this stuff to the landfill, toss it. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about any artificial container that can retain enough water. And again, it can be as small as a bottle cap of water for a micro breeding environment. I'm talking about buckets, cans, bottles, jars, jar lids, cups, children's plastic toys, wading pools, tires, hubcaps, wagons, wheelbarrows, flower pots, saucers, bird baths, block gutters, that black corrugated gutter pipe, um, tarps on wood piles, pet bowls, zombie fishing boats, canoes that have been left in the backyard and they're just collecting water, zombie hot tubs, rain barrels, trash cans. If you live in Beverly Hills, maybe a cement pond, catch basins, sump pits, cisterns, abandoned pools, toilet bowls, refrigerators, freezers, junk automobiles. I think you get the picture. We need to get these things off the property, because even a little bit of water can create a micro and breeding environment, and you're going to be playing that game of whack-a-mole. Customer's going to be happy, and then they're going to be, I'm still getting bit a little bit because we missed one of those micro breeding areas, which can now hopscotch off and become something more developed. Source reduction really also involves your client's participation sometimes. If you have ponding water in lawns, this can really lead to actually gnats is a big nuisance, as well as mosquito breeding areas. Gutter flows. Don't sleep on the gutters being clogged or the roof scuppers being clogged. I've seen it so many times. We're so focused on what's going on down here on the ground, we're not looking up above us to see what's going on above us. You could have a clogged gutter backing up with some water, create a little larva pool up there 20 feet in the air. It could be your breeding area. If your customer or your client's excessively watering the lawns, the plants, drainage away from structures is not just a termite or an ant problem. This also creates micro breeding areas for mosquito larvae. Leaf litter, debris, and maintenance. Leaf litter will retain that moisture, and moisture is key. Tall grasses and overgrowth, not only for mosquitoes, but also other insects, and then trimming and thinning of bushes and vegetation. That's just going to promote more airflow. More airflow means we're going to get drier conditions. Drier conditions means less mosquito activity. Okay, so that's just it. That's it on source reduction. Just you need to be looking for these larval habitats and doing what we need to do to eliminate them or physically correct them. So let's look at some of the container breeding mosquitoes. This is public enemy number one. This is the Asian tiger mosquito. As we can see, we have some longitudinal, excuse me, we have some horizontal stripes running along the back of the abdomen here, and then also at each one of the joints. And then we also have a long longitudinal stripe running down the front of the thorax into the head. Very recognizable, much like it has the markings that are going to stand out to you, much like a bald-faced hornet. Once you see these up close, you're going to be able to recognize the Aedes albopictus. Aedes aegypti, a little bit different. That's more of a coastal or warm weather mosquito. You folks that might be in the coastal regions are going to deal with aegypti more. And also, if you're in a metro area, we see aegypti pop up in subway tunnels and steam tunnels in areas where the temperature is warm. These are both competent vectors of major diseases like dengue, Zika, and chikungunya. These are low level loafers, and they are daytime biters that will bite on the lower extremities. One of the key questions you can ask your client, one of the most crucial questions you can ask your client is, what time of day are you getting bit and where, Mrs. Jones? And if she says, I'm getting bit in the middle of the afternoon around my ankles and my knees, I can't handle it, I got to wear long pants, and it's out in the middle of the day in the garden. Well, that right there is enough information gathered to tell you that I'm probably dealing with a container breeding mosquito. Number one, it's biting Mrs. Jones during the daytime. Number two, it's biting in very low extremities. Temperature dependent. This one's the temperature is definitely driving this one. 55, 60 degrees. You're going to find this time of year when we get up in the morning and the temperature's below 50, you're not going to see any activity. But as the day goes on and we get up in 60 and 70 degrees, you're going to notice more of that activity. Also, too, their activities really is in proximity of humans. Yeah, they can fly 2 to 500 yards, but if they don't have to, they won't. You're looking for artificial items like the tires and the buckets and the flower pots and everything discussed. Not just artificial, also like tree holes and knot holes and plant axles. Anything that can collect that little bit of water. Clean, slightly organic, fresh water. Excuse me, with a low salinity. Water is going to be still or slow moving, and it usually going to be in shaded or semi-shaded environments. The eggs are these black football shaped jokers that I was talking about. Again, in individually or in bunches of, like, say, 25. She's going to lay them in the daytime around this mean water area here, waiting for that inundation. And again, she's going to stay very close to the host. One thing about these eggs, these Aedes mosquito eggs, and we're going to get into this a little bit deeper here in a moment, these guys can stay viable for 6 to 8 months while waiting to hydrate or waiting for that inundation or waiting for that flood out. So this can bridge from season to season if if these eggs are left intact. The second component here, or the second one that's most common with us with the backyard mosquito services, are going to be the culex. Okay, culex are mainly active from nighttime or from dusk and through the night. They're crepuscular or nighttime nocturnal biters. They're going to rest during the daytime in dark, cool, humid spots. Again, they're going to come out during in dusk in the evening as the light fades. The reason they are known as canopy mosquitoes is because these guys are going to be hanging out much higher in the ecosystem. Tree canopies where the birds are, because these are avian mosquito. Actually, these are key vectors of West Nile virus, because they feed on the birds that are a bridge or a reservoir, to include mammals, which is us humans later on in the season. They are primarily humans maybe 15-20% of the time. But as the season goes on, we get later in the season, we get into the fall, you might have more of these evening biters pick up because the songbirds that they feed on have migrated south. You're not going to find that phenomenon, though, in, say, we're out in, say, the agricultural areas, say in chicken country or poultry country, because you'll find these commonly harboring around ag birds. And then also, too, in your urban environments, this is a common problem for roosting birds such as pigeons and doves. Again, rarely going to bite during the daytime unless disturbed. So again, key question: what time of day are you getting bit, Mister and Mrs. Jones? Mr. Jones says, yeah, everything's good until the evening time comes. Right around sundown, I go out on my deck and I light up a stogie, enjoy a stogie and a bourbon, and I get lit up like a Christmas tree. Well, that right there, that little conversation right there is enough to let you know, hey, I'm probably dealing with a Culex mosquito, a canopy mosquito. They're going to be loafing and they're going to be harboring much higher in the environment than, say, our 80s mosquito are. Okay. Larval habitats with the Culex, a little bit different here. Water doesn't have to be so clear. It can be permanent or semi-permanent bodies of water. It's not really the pop-up of mosquito larval habitats. They're more established, but because they're more established, you might have higher organic content. So what does this do? This opens it up to catch basins, storm drains, ditches, ponds, edges of lakes and swamps, polluted puddles, wastewater treatment areas. Unlike your 80s and your floodwater mosquitoes, which we're going to get to here in a moment, your Culex don't rely on those temporary or the pop-up environments. They prefer more consistent water sources. So again, you have the conversation with a customer, find out they're getting bit mostly in the evening. That kind of changes the game a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit on what kind of sources are we looking for larval environments. Now let's talk about the one that's going to give us all some kind of problems here, and I want to touch on it briefly because this one, everything that I just talked about, source reduction and larval environments, that just goes right out the window. And let me explain why. Because your salt marsh and your floodwater mosquitoes can have a phenomenon called synchronized broods, and these can lead to huge population explosions. All right, let's break them down. Your salt marsh mosquitoes, these are going to be ones that are going to breed primarily in coastal marshes, brackish waters, like your bays, your waters that are half ocean, half bay, your tidal areas. They are very aggressive biters and they can migrate inland. Okay. Your floodwater mosquitoes as well. A little bit different, same church, different pew. They're going to breed in temporary freshwater pools. Okay. And these are going to form after rain or big rain events. Now I'm talking about tropical storms and things of that nature, or if we just have, over irrigated areas. These can be widespread and really you're going to notice this pop up after heavy precipitation. All right. So the two that we're talking about here, as far as the salt marsh, are going to be, you might hear the term solicitan or Tanarhynchus. These are both 80s family, same church, different pew. And then also, too, your floodwater mosquito are going to be your 80s vexins. That's one species of the floodwater. There are many different species, and I don't want to bog down this discussion. I just want to show you the flight pattern habits of these floodwater and salt marsh mosquitoes because they can really give us a hard time. Your Egypti, your tiger mosquito, public enemy number one, we've established that it's a local flyer. It's going to stay close to its breeding areas and its host source. Your floodwater and your saltwater 80s mosquitoes, unfortunately, they can fly miles from breeding areas. As we can see here in this illustration, in anywhere between 10 and 2 miles. I did some research and trying to figure out, well, what was a big year for these floodwater mosquitoes and what was a big year? And literally what I found is your outbreaks are more episodic and weather driven rather than calendar driven. What happens is you get a dry period to build up in the egg, build up in the eggs, the salt marsh, the soil, the salt marshes, because they're laying their eggs in around that dry or soon to be wet soil that's waiting for it to be flooded out. Okay. And that is where we're getting going with this. What happens is that these floodwater mosquitoes lay their eggs in areas in anticipation of the inundation and flood. And they will do this species over species. And they're laying their eggs out along this bank, waiting for that one big flood. Okay. And what happens is that we'll get that one big flood and we'll inundate out and we'll flood out all those eggs and we're hydrating them all at once. So you could have some from 3 months ago, you could have some from 6 months ago, you could have some from last season. You could have thousands, tens of thousands, even millions of eggs. And what's going to happen is that water is going to all inundate or flood out at the same time. And you're going to get all that larval development, all that pupal development, all that cycling, and then they're going to hatch off as one big cloud of mosquitoes and then fly inland. And I just wanted to share that with you because I have had personal experience with this. I had operators calling me up going, John, everything we talked about, none of it's working. What's going on? And it was in a rare case that we had a big burst of floodwater mosquitoes. I'm going to give you two examples. Okay. In 2012, Tropical Storm Debbie, we had heavy flooding uh, associated with that across central and northern Florida. And that was a notable boom of floodwater mosquitoes going many miles inland. And then you flip this around. We also had a big fire off event just last year in Collier County in Florida, where we had coastal areas, one of the worst salt marsh mosquito outbreaks in about a decade. And what was this driven by? This is driven by a long period of drought. So the floodwater mosquitoes are laying that and all that caked kind of mud area. And as soon as we get that nice rain that kind of resets the water levels back to where they're supposed to be, we're flooding out tens of thousands. Point here is these guys can fly for miles. You can get a synchronized brood fire off. And at that point, what we need to do is up our game with our barrier applications to make as much of a repellent dome as possible and intercept these guys when they're moving into our living area. So floodwater and salt marsh mosquitoes, unfortunately, to be able to do any kind of source modification, that's going to be off the books because they've probably flown miles to irritate your clients. So sometimes you have the bodies of water that can't be dealt with, can't be tipped, can't be tossed, can't be flushed, and we have to use larvicides. Okay. Larvicides come in a lot of different formulations, many different formulations. Some are natural and some are synthetic. Some of the larvicides that are on the market are known as JHAs, or juvenile hormone analogs. These mimic that juvenile hormones and really fool the larva into remaining in that larval state and not maturing into or past the pupation stage. And then there are other biological larvicides, which requires that the larva actually ingest them through that filter feeding process, which we talked about. And some of them can act as a gut toxicant or a stomach poison and destroy the larva's digestive system. No matter what larva you select, understands larvicides work only on the larval stage. That's why we spend a little bit of time on the difference between the larva and the pupal stage. Always read and follow any label instructions for any EPA label product or any product that you're applying for that matter. Just because John says so doesn't make it so. Read and follow the label instructions on all products before applying them. More about larviciding. Female mosquitoes are going to lay their eggs in various states of water. We kind of covered that. It's either going to be clear or it's going to be pollutant rich. It's all species dependent. Mosquitoes are poor swimmers. It doesn't matter the species. The female is going to lay her eggs or ovipositor eggs in areas of water that have no more than 2 feet of depth. Okay. Um, Identifying these developmental stages during these surveys are going to help know when and where, if larvicides are even going to be able to be effective in proper identification, larval dipping, and things of that nature. But let's talk about a visual cue that we can use. Tumblers and wigglers. Both your larva and your pupa have a built-in defense mechanism. On a sunny day, when I go and I cast shade over top of a larval pool, the larva and the pupa are going to dive to the bottom because they think that I'm a predator. And during this dive, they're going to exhibit a very real type of behavior. Your larvae are going to wiggle or swim from the top to the bottom. They're going to wiggle down to the bottom. Those are wigglers. That's your larva. Your pupa are actually going to tumble almost like it's tumbling back when we were in grade school. And they're going to tumble to the bottom, do a bunch of somersaults to the bottom. This simple eyeball test right there is going to help you determine the developmental stage and whether or not your larvicides are going to be impacted. And here are some illustrations. These are your larvae that are attached by the breathing siphon to the surface tension of the water. This here we have some larvae here attached, and then we have some pupa, and then we have some alien looking pupa that are attached to the surface tension of the water by their breathing siphons. Those are just some more visual cues on what looks like what when we're out there. So that brings us full circle to barrier applications. All right. So let's talk about what are we doing with these barrier applications with the zone out. Barrier applications are not to be confused with ULV or fogging applications, completely different. Barrier applications are targeted or site specific. Your ULV applications are designed to stay aloft. You want the drift. Barrier applications, no, exact opposite. You want a larger droplet size, 50 to 80 microns, so that we're going to be focused and site specific and we're going to get it on target. Your smaller microns that are like in ULV, they're designed to hang around up in the air. Okay. We don't want that. Also, we're going to increase the dose to the insects. This is going to reduce the chances of wind drift, again, keeping it on focus and on target. And having the fatter droplets going to aid in application to surfaces, the underside of foliage, and other resting and loafing areas. All right, and on these. We are concentrating on these shaded and moist areas. Remember how that mosquito hopscotched into the activity area at the very beginning of this to find the host. That's where we're going to focus our barrier applications to intercept that biting female before she gets to us and makes a meal out of us. Safety, safety, safety. Keeping your team safe and protecting the environment while protecting the public health. It's a tall task if we do not have systems. Never mix, load, or clean your equipment near ponds, streams, water features, ditches. We don't want to run the risk of possibility of contamination. You always want to mix and load on a level surface. And it's a good idea, good practice just to mix what you need for that spray. If you have product left over in the application tank, I try to blow it out on each location. But if you have some left over, you want to shake the solution in the tank, bring it back in the solution completely, and use that remaining product before we mix more and add more on top of it. Some of the common resting areas that I was referring to that we want to focus our applications, or outdoors vegetation near homes, near the hosts for the Aedes albopictus or public enemy number one, dense shading, dense thick foliage. Remember, stay away from the flowering plants. And oh, by the way, weeds have flowers too. We want to focus on these cool, humid, outdoor vegetation that's going to be close to these breeding containers. Culex pipiens, pretty much same, with the exception of some of your resting areas are going to be a little bit higher elevation. Your upper foliage areas, tree canopies. Now we're talking about porch overhangs, things of that nature. Porch overhangs and one of them soffits, things of that nature. Also tree cavities and hollow logs. We're going to treat any of the surfaces where mosquito would rest or try to rest near the surface. One thing we need to remember is on hot days, mosquitoes are going to rest deep in the foliage. So we can't be standing 6, 7 feet away from the bush and just be kind of waving our application wand around. All right. We need to get up right on the target and we need to get right up on that foliage. We want to make sure that we're standing close enough to that foliage to get plume penetration into the foliage. So instead of just standing back and just kind of waving the wand around, use the Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off, or sand the floor, Daniel-san. All right. You want to be making small circular movements with the boom of the applicator, and you're going to create a vortex. And what is this going to do? This is going to drive the material deeper into the bushes. Or deeper into the foliage that the mosquitoes are resting on. Also, too, it's going to be tossing the foliage around like this, top, bottom, and help us get more complete applications to that foliage and deeper into the foliage where the mosquitoes are actually resting. And we're going to be focusing on covering all sides of the home to create this repellent barrier as a barrier for entry into our living spaces. And again, we're dealing most of the time with Aedes albopictus, so we're focusing down low in these moist shaded environments, and obviously up high and in the canopies if it's Culex. I want to come back around. I know we already talked about this, but I want to come back around to the mode of action because this is important. The main mode of repellency for zone out is the ability to mask those insect pheromones. So where am I going with this? Now I'm looking at this larval pool here. If I'm doing a zone out application around these areas are going to repel the mosquitoes. They're going to confuse the mosquitoes. They're going to mask those attractive scents. Remember that pheromone I said the larva was putting on off? We can mask that. We can confuse the insect. And also we can expose the neurological effects. So we want to make sure that we're doing these applications around these areas. And let's get to the point of repellency as we wrap this thing up, because we have this question a lot, and Dr. Jamel is the one that kind of shared this information with me, and I want to expand on this a little bit more. What the industry refers to repellent insecticides are really not true repellents. Your synthetic pyrethroids, they're not active in the vapor phase. They're not active from a distance. They're not doing anything that's physically repelling that insect. They're not spatial repellents. Synthetic pyrethroids are not odor maskers. Confusants, like we just talked about with the 25B, they're not visual masking. They're not anything to keep it from feeding. What they are is they are a contact irritant or an exciter repellent. And what that means in plain English speak is they requires tarsal contact on the surfaces to basically give the insect hot foot or create these neurological disturbances. So where I'm going with this is the mosquito has to land on that treated area for the synthetic insecticide to be effective. Where you get true repellency is the vapor phase from the essential oils off gassing. So if you do want true repellency, you should you we need to be adding a essential oil into the mix. Now, if you're a operator that runs and just say runs straight bifenthrin or straight synthetic pyrethroid, all right, one way that we can achieve this repellency is we can add it to the synthetic pyrethroid. Excuse me, stuttering a little bit there. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we bring the pyrethroid fully into solution first, and then you want to add zone out on top. I would recommend about 1 ounce per gallon, so you're talking 3 or 4 ounces per tank. All right, and then you want to go ahead and bring that fully into solution. This is going to give you the residual that's resting on the leaf from the, we'll say, bifenthrin in this case, but then also it's going to give you the spatial repellency to drive the mosquitoes out away from the area. If you still have mosquitoes venturing into your living area, and yeah, we might be hitting them with the synthetic pyrethroid, but wouldn't it be more beneficial not to have the mosquitoes in the living area at all and just create doubt from our customers? So if you want true repellency in your mosquito program, we need to be adding the 25B to the mix. Last thing here is we get on out here is your property safety walk. Be aware of environmental conditions before, during, and after each application. You want to keep the insecticides where we intended to apply them. Perform that property safety walk. I don't care if you've been there 100 times before. Things change from visit to visit. Awareness and documentation are key, because if we're identifying these targeted application areas and safety hazards to include the aquatic features, and we're noting all those, then you cannot be put in a position where somebody could say you were negligent. Okay. We live in a highly litigious society. Also, personal safety thing here, folks, never walk backwards with a load on your back. Slips, trips, and falls, number one thing for injury out there. Your backpack, mister, can weigh as much as 50 pounds or more when it's full. Always look behind you when you're stepping. Try to work sideways or laterally through the application area. Do not ever walk backwards. Had an operator actually step backwards into a swimming pool down south a few years back. Came very close to drowning because he couldn't get that 60-pound rig off him quick enough. Seriously, slips, trips, and falls. Just be very, very aware out there. We want to avoid flowering plants and pollinator protection, edibles. Take a peek over that fence. Look at what's going on the other side of the fence. Decorative concrete, sun bleached materials. This is an essential oil product. I just advise that you stay away from that. Also, too, there's really no reason to do direct applications to patio furniture or children's toys or things of that nature. You want to be very conscious of the pollinators. Stay away from those flowering plants. And again, more about documentation, more about CYA. Everybody's got the apps on their phones. We can note the weather conditions, record your wind speed, record the direction, record the temperature, the precipitation, or other notable weather conditions. That way you can never be accused of being negligent. And we always want to account for the wind conditions and the speeds to prevent and drift for off-target applications, because chemical trespass is a very real thing. And as we bring this home, remember, back into a parking space whenever you can. The National Transportation Highway Safety Board did a study, and we drive forward 99.5% of the time. However, 25% of the accidents we get in are when we're driving in reverse. All right. And the majority, if not the lion's share, of the fatal accidents that happen when we're driving in reverse are children that are 4 years and under. All right. Back into a parking space, gangster park whenever you can. Look like you're looking for that quick getaway. Okay. But really what that does is that minimizes you driving backwards. We just don't want to drive backwards. Use cones to mark your truck. Okay. It does a couple of things. It brings visual cues, brings awareness to your company, but also it forces you as a technician to walk around that truck before you get back in. Always do that property safety walk we talked about. Always check your PPE. Make sure your hoses are working correctly. Make sure the lid is on tightly. Worst feeling in the world is to put that rig on your back and have a bunch of solution running down your back because the lid wasn't on tight enough. Mix and load on a level surface. Stay away from water features, ditches, and drains when we're mixing and loading. Never walk backwards. And these last three here,
You can adjust the flow rate and the speed to account for wind conditions and also terrain. If you have wind conditions and you want to minimize the drift, you can open up the aperture that's on the front of the boom of the delivery device, and that's going to make the droplet fatter. And then also we can slow down the RPM speed of the mister, because the less air pressure behind that mix, the less it's going to disperse out, and the fatter the droplets are going to be, the faster we're going to get it on target. Okay. Two takeaways for you here, folks, and then I am done. You guys have been an awesome audience, and then and I'll take any questions. Just remember these two things. Zone Out combines 8 essential oils and sodium lauryl sulfate at precise ratios that leverage peer-reviewed and patented synergies into one concentrate. This combination provides fast knockdown, strong efficacy, repellency, and extended protection in one single low-impact 25B product. And with that, I say thank you very much. This is the QR code for Zone Out that will take you to the resource page for Zone Out on our website. There is my contact information here. And then this is the way that you can follow Nisus on social media.
What an awesome plug. What an awesome plug for our social media.
There you go. So you can follow Nisus on Instagram, YouTube, that Facebook thingy, and LinkedIn. And there's a QR code for our entire product catalog. I know I ran a little long, and I know that was like putting 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound sack. But let's go ahead and take any questions that I might have out there.
Yeah, John, awesome presentation. The passion that you have, I will say, the passion that you have for Zone Out is truly amazing. And I think it is very well received in this industry. So that's why we're really happy to have you here. On behalf of Nisus on our YouTube channel talking about Zone Out. And we apologize for the technical difficulties beforehand, but we got it all squared around. And so, yeah, we did have a couple questions come through. John, what's the best bait station to pair with Zone Out? Do you have any opinions or any type of feedback for any type of bait station?
I would say, and if the question is bait station, then they might be referring to the stations that are like that hold the larvicide. There is one called Insecto. There's another one called Integrated, and then there's another one out there called Mosquito Con that I'm familiar with.
Those could all be paired with Zone Out, correct?
Right. They can all be paired with Zone Out. The one thing I would say is that Zone Out is repellent in nature, and we want to stay away from those bait state. We want to stay away from those devices when we're applying the Zone Out, because we don't want to confuse the mosquitoes. We want the Zone Out to go into those areas. So if you drop, say, an Integrated, and I'm not plugging anybody's, but if you drop one of these devices near say a larval breeding area, then I would skip that applying the Zone Out around that larval breeding area and let the device do the work for you there.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. Good feedback for that question. Is this product only for mosquitoes? We responded a tiny bit, but can you share?
Sure. So currently Zone Out is labeled for mosquitoes and fleas. We do have a label revision that is in the process of working its way through the various states where we've submitted, where we will be including ticks on the language as well. It will be the same. It will be the same formulation. We're not changing anything with the formulation. We just got some later testing data that was recently submitted, along with some new pack sizes. Currently, it's available in the 1 gallon tip and measure, but we'll be adding some new pack sizes to include a 50 gallon barrel as well. Okay. So same formulation, but currently labeled for mosquitoes and fleas. But we do have data on ticks, and that will be on a label in the very near future. However, it is not on there now.
Okay. And also, this was not a question, but I just wanted to ask you, what would your advice be for pest control owners and technicians communicating the message and the importance of having some type of mosquito control, to their customers and incorporating Zone Out? What's that message that you would think would be best conveyed?
Well, Zone Out's going to, offer you the possibility of controls with a very sustainable delivery system. It's always, our personal safety is always is not always, but frequently is a trade-off in this world. You got a certain amount of safety for a trade-off. This here is sustainability without sacrifice. Zone Out is sustainability without compromise. We're going to get the efficacy you need to protect the living space, but then also to
you can rest assured that we're doing this in a sustainable and a responsible method. Just being familiar as the operator, being familiar with the various pathogens that are out there, knowing a few of them, and don't just spit out names, knowing what they are, and how they're transmitted. You don't got to be a virologist or an epidemiologist, but at the same time, having some knowledge about how dangerous that mosquitoes are to the overall public health would be a great first step.
That's awesome. Great information, John. Like I said, your presentation was awesome. Some great information. This will be housed on our YouTube channel for forever, so everybody will be able to get a recording. And yeah, so thank you so much, John, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And we will see you all at our next live YouTube webinar.
Thank you so much. Be safe out there, everybody.
Bye, John.